There are competing identities that easily creep into the church, and so Paul is giving them a foundation to continue to remember who they are. And it's not just the ancient church that had ideas of who their identity was creeping into the church. Even today, not just our church, but churches all around the world struggle sometimes to know, who are we? It's possible that Paul is doing this because this young fledgling church is being persecuted. Right? Imagine this, these pagan people that didn't know God are turning to God and turning to Christ, changing their lives in a land that doesn't know God. Like, we live in a time and age where if you live in the Western world, not everyone agrees with Christianity and they might harass you for it, but everyone's kind of living on the assumptions of Christianity. So you're not really that persecuted, while we might feel that way sometimes. These people are turning to Christ for the first time in this place. And so Paul might be saying, I want to remind you guys again, that your life, yes, is here as a Thessalonian. And yes, you are being persecuted, but most important, you belong to God. Your life is in him, and you can get through persecution, harassment, whatever it is, knowing that whatever's happening here, what's true of you is in God. It could just be that they're young. And I don't know how you were in your maybe first couple of decades of life. Maybe it's happening in the later decades of life where you're trying to figure out who you are. This is a young church. They're forming an understanding of their identity, and Paul wants to remind them, hey, when you build up whatever you're going to be as a church in this area, I want you to also remember that first and foremost, you are in God. And we need to be reminded of that here, even at Bethel Church in 2025, 2,000 years later. We have had our fair share of struggles over the years, haven't we? We have faced, if you're here today, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm new here. I'm glad you're here. You can have a little bit of a scoop on our church, which I don't think is vastly different than other churches, but we're a group of humans, and so we're not perfect. We have faced more prevailing headwinds in a short amount of time than most churches do in decades. Lots of leadership and transition. I am the fourth lead pastor in 10 years. Yeah, that's crazy. And I've been here for 2.5 years, so we're going strong. That's a lot of transition in leadership. Our church here, like many churches, was shaken during the pandemic 5 years ago when at least half of the body left. And that's not just our church, but that happened in a lot of places. These realities of leadership turnover and a church being about half the size or less than it was, these could easily become a church's identity, right? We're gonna rally around this story. We're gonna make this about who we are. You could do it in a couple of different ways. You could do it like in the defeated sense where it's like, yeah, look what happened to us, poor us, and you never move past it, right? There's wounds that have never healed and it's just a story you live in. Or it could be the other side where it's like a victory story, like look what we've come through. Look what we've done. And that becomes the story that you just live in. Now, we don't want to forget where we've been. We don't want to forget that part of our story. We don't want to learn from we want to learn from the past. We want to trace God's faithfulness in the past, but we don't want to get stuck in the past because that's not what defines us. Hardship, persecution, those things, while they're part of our story, are not ultimately what defines Bethel Church or any church. According to Paul, God defines the church. Other identities can creep in other than that, right? Not just here, but in all kinds of churches everywhere, right? Buildings can sometimes become a church's identity, where the church cares about mission, and then all of a sudden over the years, mission drifts towards, we really want this building, this new building, this bigger building. That becomes the identity. It could be a style of the way we like music or church. That becomes identity, or tradition. Or it could be who we're reaching. That's who we are. It could be national politics or affiliations. What happens often is you have churches who define themselves not by who they are, but who they're not, right? Well, we're not like that church down the street or that church over here. We're a different kind of church. And that becomes our identity. It could be churches that create themselves around a celebrity pastor, that person is the most important. The church rallies around it, and oftentimes those pastors fall and the church falls with them. None of those things are a church's true identity. They're all characteristics of a church. Some are healthy, some are not healthy, but they're not solid identities. They do not give a church a real understanding of who they are and whose they are. And it's really easy to adopt any one of those, maybe multiple in a church, and forget who we truly are.